Hey everybody, my name is Caleb Hohenschild. I'm a gaffer and key grip here in the Northwest Arkansas region. Wanted to do a quick video today on clamps, specifically talking about the do-it-all style clamps. So not talking about the clamps that are more specific for a certain task, like grid clamps or even platypus clamps, things like that, but just talking about clamps that are more fitted for, clamping onto beams, things of that nature. So kind of the clamps that you take with you when you don't really know what the situation entails, but you know that you're gonna need some clamps to get the job done. So one thing I want to touch on is I've only been in the industry for about 7-ish years so far, and so I'm not super knowledgeable on the history of these items. For that, you'll want to check out a different channel like Meet the Gaffer or Gaffer Salon, or even Gaffer and Gear with Andrew Locke. Really good channels with great information on these items. But for this, I'm just going to go through kind of each clamp and the good parts, the bad parts of each one. Some of these two down here you may have not heard about or known about, so kind of wanted to highlight these as well. But yeah, let's get into it. So here we have a Mafer clamp or a super clamp or a super Mafer. Depending on the different area that you work in, you'll hear them called different things. These are really good for biting down onto square stock, as you can see there. So it's good for square items, and truth be told, not really good for many other things. So if I have a 2x4 here, and loosen this up, you'll see that it can bite down fairly decently, but if you put a little pressure on it, it does break a certain way and can break loose. So I tend to not use these a whole lot. They're also not super good for speed rail. I know some companies do sell a little insert down here that allows you to clamp onto straight objects a little bit better. In addition, this one's by Matthews. I'm not sure if other companies do this different ways, but this one, instead of a rubber coating, it's kind of rubbery, but it's kind of more plasticky as well, which is not super handy when trying to clamp onto things. So they're good for square stock, not super good for a ton of other things. You'll see these on the end of dolly tracks quite often. Yeah, again, they have their uses, and it is good to have some in the truck, and you'll find them in pretty much every grip truck here in the States at least. But aside from that, they don't have quite as many uses as the clamps that we're going to talk about coming up. All right, most of you guys are gonna know what this is. This is a Cardellini clamp. This is a short end jaw Cardellini. And my understanding is Cardellini really changed the game when this thing came out. There was nothing on the market that really bit down vertically as opposed to kind of clamping that way. And that gave these Cardellini clamps a lot of holding power. So you will see these on basically any set that you go on. Definitely in the States, probably worldwide if I had to guess, although I can't really speak to that because I'm based here in the States. But I mean, pretty much any set you go on here in the States, these are gonna be on there. They come in different lengths, so this is a short jaw. I believe this is a 2-inch version, but they do come in longer versions as well. These are a little bit pricier, which is why I don't have as many of these in the kit. I've gone with the Mathelinis, which if I put this one up for a sec, so this is a Mathellini, basically the same concept as the Cardellini. I believe Matthews actually licensed this idea or this concept from Cardellini, the maker of the Cardellini clamp, and for good reason. That they did the right thing. It seems they didn't just try to knock it off and avoid patents, but they actually licensed it, which is great. This is a center jaw, so the way you can tell between a center jaw and an end jaw is this one has the baby pin coming off the clamp portion, whereas this one has the baby pin coming off the thread portion of the clamp. This one is a long jaw. I believe it's 6 or 7 inches. I'll correct it in the video caption if I'm wrong. And this one is much smaller. Both are very handy because you're gonna run into a lot of different situations on a set. So specifically speaking, the long jaw, I've got quite a few of these because they're just really handy if you're trying to bite onto, long or wide beams. Let's say you're in a factory or something like that, or you're trying to bite onto a wide shelf or something of that nature. These are very handy, and they lock up very tight. Whereas the Center jaw is very handy for if you're rigging a slightly heavier light because you're keeping the light fairly close to the center of gravity, whereas with the long jaw, that'll stay, whereas with the long jaw, if let's say you're only clamping onto something about this big, so let's say you're only clamping on to something about this big, it works in a pinch, but it's not ideal because the light is cantilevered off the center of gravity so far. So that is where something like a center jaw would come in very, very handy. Just tighten that up, and that's not going anywhere. So Mathellinis, in my opinion, are a little bit of an improvement on the Cardellini design, and the biggest reason, really the only reason, is the handle. That's why I prefer Mathelinis over Cardellinis. So with Cardellinis, you typically need to use a crescent wrench to really, really bite down on something. So again, if you are biting down on like a beam or things like that, it's usually good practice to put a crescent wrench on one of these knobs and just tighten it down another half rotation or half tighten, just to get a really good bite on it. Whereas with the Mathellini, I find with the bigger handle, you can get a little bit more leverage on it to where you typically don't have to use a crescent wrench. You know, that's not to say the Cardellini is inferior. I've gone with Mathelinis mostly. You really can't go wrong with either. Like I said, they're practically the same design. And again, if you're working in the States off a grip truck, you're gonna find quite a few of these in any grip truck, you know, depending on the size, 2 ton, 3 ton, 10 ton, you know, you're gonna have 10, 20 of these guys, if not more. So that is the gist of the Mathellini. If you're building out a small grip package, I think these things are pretty much invaluable. So this is the next clamp we're talking about. This one is made by Kupo. This is a Kupo Supervisor Clamp. And it actually has a couple of features that I think are worth talking about. Otherwise, I wouldn't really bother with it because it is definitely just a ripoff of a Cardellini or Mathellini. So for one, you can get these in really long lengths, which I think is very, very handy. There have been situations where a typical long jaw Mathellini will not quite get me all the way to where I need to go. So these have been very, very nice to have. I just keep 2 of them on the truck. They're handy in a pinch. You know, if you're clamping onto a long or a wide beam, these really do come in handy. They lock up, as far as I can see, they lock up just as tight as a Mathellini or Cardellini. I mean, so if I lock that up nice and tight, they have the bigger handle as well, which is nice. They kind of ripped that from the Mathellini version. So that gives you more leverage, which is nice. But the other cool feature of this, and there's a couple cool features of these, is that if I go back over here to my super clamp, the pin on the super clamp can actually come out, and this has a receiver for a baby pin. That's the hex size that usually comes with a super Mafer. So same locking mechanism, you just press this button in, drop it in, and then you can tighten her up. So this is kind of cool because you could theoretically do multiple things with the same clamp. So you could have a small light coming off this, maybe like a Dido light or a Forza 60, or you know, one of the smaller aperture 60-watt lights. And then you could, you know, say rig a gobo head and a grip arm coming off with like a flag or what have you. So I think this is kind of a cool little feature. The other cool thing about this clamp is it actually has a channel that's cut into the middle of the shaft here. It doesn't interfere at all with the handle mechanism spinning. This actually spins a little bit better than even a Mathellini does. Cardellini is definitely the worst in that category if I had to kind of rank them. The Cardellini, sometimes you just have to sit there and spin, spin, spin. Mathellini is a little bit better. This one is really, really good. I mean, come on, look at that. That is really nice. So, but back to the point, the little channel that they've cut in the center here, that actually keeps the jaws from becoming misaligned. So basically on a Cardellini, the jaws can very easily become misaligned, and it quickly becomes an issue where you need 3 hands to do what you're trying to do, right? So let's say you're holding this up here, you're trying to spin this guy, and this thing keeps falling. That can definitely be annoying. So that is the gist of the Kupo Supervisor Clamp. Again, it's pretty handy. They've got a few cool innovations going on here. So check it out. You know, if you've got a 1 or 2 ton truck, it doesn't hurt just to throw 1 or 2 of these in your truck for those strange circumstances where you might have to bite onto something a little bit bigger, or you might need the functionality of having 2 pins on the same clamp. All right, so now we go into a couple clamps by the company 9 Solutions, I believe. This is the Python clamp. I ran into these on a show we were doing earlier on in the year where the key grip I had a couple of these and I thought they were really, really cool. They offer a couple advantages over, let's say, a Mathellini or Cardellini, although probably a Mathellini or Cardellini still does most things better than these, but these do have a couple advantages. Number one is if you're clamping onto like a weird surface or a very slender kind of, let's say, pipe or something like that, both the Cardellini and the Mathellini have a considerable gap in there to where they can't bite down securely, at least, on anything that's smaller than that. But the Python actually allows you to bite down. It has two different kind of spaces cut out for biting onto different things. So this large one is for things like plywood and beams and speed rail. It fastens down really, really tightly to speed rail for sure. But then this second one is for biting down on things that are even thinner. So, really thin pieces of pipe. Additionally, that helps you clamp onto things that a Mathellini might struggle to. So something that's really awkwardly shaped. Mathelinis and Cardellinis are great for things like beams and plywood and speed rail. They're perfect for that. They're really good at most things, I would say. These are a little bit better at handling weird kind of surfaces and weird kind of awkward angles and things like that. These can really be a hero with that. You can get a lot of leverage on this handle, which is really nice. The baby pin is a good size. It's not some stubby little thing that you can't, get a grip head onto or can't get a decent light onto. One drawback that I have seen so far is sometimes they can come out of the truck kind of like that. This is allowed to spin freely. So that, I could see that being an issue if somebody hasn't used one of these before. They're like, they'll be trying to bite down on something and the clamp won't go any farther than that. So that could definitely be an issue. You might have to just show them how to do it. But any person with common sense is probably gonna be able to figure it out. One other advantage to this, and then I'll try to wrap this video up pretty quick, is the threads are actually contained inside the clamp, which to me is a huge advantage. So you can see them if I hold the clamp down like that, but for the most part, for a large majority of the time, really unless you're doing that, you won't be able to see the threads. And you might ask, why is that a big deal? Well, so on a Mathellini or a Cardellini, and I have had this happen several times, these are going to be living in milk crates for the most part. This has happened a couple times where people have thrown these in, and I think I've done it a few times really. People have thrown these in onto another clamp, and they hit and they'll actually ding they'll cause, what am I trying to say? They'll just cause a deformation in the thread, and that can really be an issue to where these things sometimes you really have to wrench these things to get them to spin. That can really be a detriment. That's actually happened a few times with this Cardellini, and this thing's 5 or 6 years old at this point, so it's been through the ringer. But you can see just how difficult that is to spin. It doesn't spin freely anymore, and that is the reason. It's been damaged a few times. If you're a best boy or you've been a best boy in the past, you might see people filing those deformations down so that the handle can spin over it again, and that is something that you can do. But if that happens several times, it really can ruin a good clamp, and that's kind of what's happened to this Cardellini. This thing still works. I still keep it kind of in the rotation, but that is something to be aware of. And that, presumably, at least I've only had these for a couple months, so that, I haven't had them for years and years, but presumably I don't think that is really gonna happen with the Python clamp. These are made by 9 Solutions. I'll link these in the description. I got these from the grip store. Really good clamps. I love the rubber on them, by the way, as well. That really helps them bite down on things without hurting the object that you're biting down on. Really, really nice rubber and very, very grippy as well. So this is our last clamp. This one is called the Savior clamp. It's a little bit lighter weight than the Python clamp. I'd assume because the Python clamp just has a bigger handle, which is an advantage that the Python clamp has. and we'll touch on why the Savior clamp, or why I think anyways, the Savior clamp has a slightly smaller handle in just a second. But probably the biggest advantage, or one of the biggest advantages of this to me, is it's got kind of these articulating pieces down here that actually make the force that you're applying through the clamp, the best I can tell, they make that force more downward focused, as opposed to when you clamp like this, you're actually putting force away from the clamp. These seem to clamp downward with even more force than a Python would. They seem to be more akin to like a Mathellini, where it's clamping down instead of, you know, hinge clamping, even though this is a hinge design. Obviously there is a limitation with the width that you can go to, so this is really good for speed rail. This can be really good for, you know, pieces of wood and things like that. These things lock up really, really tight. I've only got one of these, like I said, would love more, but they also have the advantage that the threads are probably not gonna get damaged. So they have that in common with the Python clamp, as opposed to the Mathellini. So the threads are all kind of self-contained. You can see it if I do that there. And probably another really, really big advantage for some of you is that these actually have thread holes on the top and on the bottom. So not only do you have the baby pin here, you also have thread points. So you can stick, this is a 3/8 thread baby pin. So you can stick a baby pin in there, and then you have a really, really rock solid mounting point. I've also noticed that you can stick a baby pin. Let me turn this over really quick. I've noticed also that you can stick a baby pin into this baby pin. So you can extend your baby pin out if you need a little bit more length there. And again, the same thing that we were talking with the Supervisor clamp is that, you know, you can rig a light to the top or to the bottom, and then you can rig your modifier off of the exact same clamp, which is really, really cool. It's something I've done with C clamps because typically those have 2 baby pins on them. But I mean, look at that. That is really, really strong. And it locks up very, very strong with plywood and beams and things like that too. So check out the 9 Solution Savior clamp. Another cool thing is they also come in different sizes. So you can get kind of like the, you know, they make the mini leany versions of the Cardellini's that are better for clamping onto like camera handles and things like that. You can get the exact same thing for this. I've seen some camera assistants have those. They're really good for, you know, clamping a Teradek or mounting a Teradek onto the back of a studio monitor. Something like that. I think these really open up a little bit of creativity that you can have with your rigging. And I plan to, again, you know, if the need persists, I might buy a few more of these because these have really impressed me. One thing I should mention is they also have 1/4-20 holes as well. So here's a 3/8, here's a 1/4-20. And so you've got your 1/4-20 hole right there as well. So kind of a cool solution. Savior clamp and Python clamp. Again, this is the Supervisor clamp from Kupo, Mathellini Long Jaw, and Mafer clamp. So that is pretty much it. Just wanted to highlight a few clamps that I use fairly often. Leave a comment, tell me what your favorite clamp that you've used is. And with that being said, that's the end of the video. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great day.